An $80 million deal isn't for self-taught nobodies, Chad said as he yanked my laptop from the table like it belonged to him. The son of the CEO, the heir to a company he never built. A man who thought leadership meant cologne and confidence, not competence. I sat back, silent. Not out of respect, out of calculation. Because as his fingers jabbed at the trackpad like he was trying to win a video game, I already knew what he didn't. This entire demo lived and breathed on code he had never touched, and the moment he tried to present it, it would collapse under his arrogance. My name is Kate. For 6 years, I'd built the heart of Cortexia's logistics engine, often alone in empty offices that smelled like stale coffee and overheated servers. I'd missed birthdays, lost weekends, and patched critical failures at 3 a.m. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I believed in what I was building. I never had the right pedigree. No MBA, no Ivy League crest embossed on a diploma. Just raw skill and the kind of stubborn patience you earn through trial, error, and 100 late nights staring at a blinking cursor. That was enough to win clients, enough to stabilize systems across continents. But apparently, it wasn't enough to sit at the front of the room when the company's golden boy showed up. The conference room smelled faintly of burnt toner, and the projector light washed the table in sterile white. Across from us sat the buyers, Galaxy Systems. Their CTO, Marcus Liu, was a man known for precision. He didn't smile, didn't waste words. If something didn't work, he'd see it instantly. This deal, this $80 million licensing contract, had been months in the making. I'd built the sandbox environment piece by piece, triple-checking every dependency, even scripting recovery points in case of failure. It was airtight, until Chad touched it. "Watch this," he said, puffing out his chest like he'd written a single line of code in his life. I did watch. I watched the dashboard stutter once, then twice. A loading icon spun endlessly, mocking him. His palms grew slick, his forced smile wider than his knowledge. "It's just lag," he muttered, clicking harder. The buyer stayed stone-faced. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Then the screen froze completely. Browser dead. Silence spread across the table like a fault line. Marcus leaned forward. "Is it supposed to do that?" I kept my jaw tight. And then Chad, still clinging to bravado, turned it into an insult. A Harvard man should present the deal, not a self-taught coder. The words landed like a slap. Not because they hurt, but because they revealed everything. To him, my years of building meant nothing compared to the last name stitched on his tailored suit. Galaxy's team disconnected minutes later, polite, but cold. No questions, no follow-up, just silence. 15 minutes after that, my phone rang. Unknown Bay Area number. I expected Chad, maybe an attempt to blame me. But it wasn't Chad. "Kate?" The voice said calmly. "This is Marcus Liu. We're canceling the deal." The words weren't a surprise. Not after watching Chad fumble like a child in front of seasoned professionals. What startled me was what Marcus said next. "They'll return. Papers, flowers, apologies. Don't reply." Then the line went dead. I sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear, the hum of the air conditioner louder than the thoughts racing in my head. On the other side of the wall, I could hear Chad shouting at IT, throwing words like sabotage and glitches into the air as if excuses could resurrect the dead. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I'd spent too long in this company to still be shocked by their choices. Too long being overlooked, replaced in presentations, erased from executive updates. What I felt instead was clarity. Because the truth was undeniable. The system was mine. The work was mine. And no matter how many titles they gave him, no matter how many times they tried to shove me into the shadows, they couldn't take that away. That afternoon, I walked back to my desk with a calmness I hadn't felt in months. Not triumph, not revenge, just certainty. The deal might have died in that room, but something else was born. The first crack in the empire. The morning after the demo crash, the office carried a smell I'll never forget. burnt coffee, stale carpet, and guilt. The kind of atmosphere you don't need to see to understand. People avoided eye contact, phones rang unanswered, and conversations cut off whenever I walked by. I was called into Lena's office. She didn't even look at me when I walked in, just gestured vaguely toward the chair while typing furiously on her laptop. "Obviously, yesterday didn't go the way we hoped," she said flatly. I sat without answering. Her words weren't for me. They were for the record. She kept typing. "There's concern about technical transparency. Chad has asked to take a more hands-on role moving forward." "And me?" I asked quietly. She looked up then, forcing a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We'd like you to focus on documentation for now." Internal support. It's important work documentation. That was corporate code for "we don't trust you in front of clients anymore." The same as telling a surgeon to organize cotton swabs after someone else botched the operation. I nodded once. Of course. Wouldn't want Chad to strain himself. Her smile faltered, but she didn't respond. The meeting was over. I walked back to my desk, past the glass conference room where Chad was already holding a vision sync, pacing like he was on stage at a TED Talk. Milo, my junior developer, caught my eye from his desk. His face said it all. "They demoted you, didn't they?" "They want me on documentation," I told him. His mouth fell open. "But you built the system." "He can't even—" "Doesn't matter." I cut in. "You're in charge of the Galaxy account now." He paled. "I'm not ready." "You'll be fine," I lied. Because it wasn't about him being ready. It was about letting the system show what happens when arrogance replaces competence. I opened a blank Confluence page and began writing. The truth lived in my head. Thousands of hours of context, half-documented fixes, invisible workarounds scribbled in notebooks during server outages. But what I gave them was polished, professional, and just incomplete enough to make Chad believe he understood it. Some modules I labeled as legacy, deprecated others. I flagged as requires elevated permissions. And Module 6? I sealed it behind a cryptographic lock. My lock. Without my key, it wouldn't run. Not malicious, not sabotage. Just safe. If they wanted to sideline me, fine. But they weren't going to run my work into the ground without learning what it meant to do it alone. Days later, I watched through the glass wall as Chad tried to run a smaller internal demo. He paced, clicked, frowned. The loading icon spun. He clicked again, muttered something, slammed the laptop shut, and stormed out before anyone could ask questions. Nobody called me in. Nobody asked for help. That was the strategy now. Pretend everything was fine while the cracks deepened. But whispers started spreading. Galaxy hadn't responded since the failed pitch. Sales was panicking. Investors were asking questions. And the CTO had conveniently gone on vacation. Me? I was invisible. Not fired. Not scolded. Just erased. No calendar invites, no executive threads, no meetings. A ghost haunting the system I had built. At lunch, I took long walks. I stopped rushing my coffee. I even drove the scenic route home instead of racing to collapse in bed. The anger that had burned in me for years had shifted into something colder, something sharper. Because here was the truth. They didn't just sideline me. They underestimated me. They thought by cutting me out of the spotlight, they could control the system. But the system wasn't theirs to control. Not really. Late one night, alone in the office, I opened the build logs. 6 years of my work scrolled before me. Every commit, every patch, every sleepless night turned into lines of code. I sat there staring at it, remembering the moments when the system barely held together, when one missed keystroke could have sunk it. Then I renamed the repository. One word. Artifact. Because that's what it was now. My creation, my proof, my shield. And if they wanted to bury me, they'd have to dig through what I left behind. By the end of that week, the ripple had started. An email from Galaxy's CTO to Lena landed with surgical precision. Subject: Install error. Module 6 conflict. No exclamation marks, no drama. Just a single line that carried the weight of a grenade. Soon after, Chad was stomping down the hallway, barking into a Bluetooth headset that wasn't even connected to anything. His face was flushed, his voice too loud, as if noise could erase consequences. I stood quietly in the kitchen, pouring burnt coffee into a chipped mug, when Lena cornered me. "Kate?" she said sharply. "Did you hardlock a module behind your credentials?" I stirred my coffee. "Which module?" Her jaw tightened. 6. "Interesting," I said evenly. "That's one of the ones Chad told me he had covered." She flinched. "Galaxy says it's throwing keyholder errors. They need immediate remediation." I took a slow sip. "Protocol's clear. Legal needs to send me a release form signed by all parties. Then I'll help." Her eyes narrowed. She wanted to argue, but she knew I was right. Corporate rules were finally on my side. And for the first time in months, I felt it. Not anger. Not even satisfaction. Just balance. The system was speaking for me now. The next week at the office felt like living inside a pressure cooker. People moved faster, spoke quieter, and avoided each other in hallways. Rumors spread like wildfire, each one worse than the last. Galaxy had gone silent. No follow-ups, no scheduling, no small talk. Silence from a potential client isn't neutrality. It's a verdict. Everyone knew it. Everyone felt it. Inside the building, the blame game had begun. I wasn't invited to the executive meeting, of course, but Milo filled me in later. The CEO, Everett Bowman, Chad's father, stormed in with the kind of fury only a man protecting both his money and his son can summon. He demanded answers, waving reports like they were weapons. Chad blamed legacy issues. Lena tried to talk about strategic repositioning. The VP of sales pointed directly at the failed demo. It wasn't a conversation. It was a bloodbath. By the end, the only thing they could agree on was to draft a carefully worded update for investors. Words like alignment and roadmap were tossed around, as if buzzwords could erase the sight of a frozen dashboard. Meanwhile, my name was spoken less and less. Not because they'd forgotten me, but because acknowledging me meant admitting the truth. That I was the only one who could fix this. I kept my head down, at least outwardly. I updated documentation, answered small technical questions, and acted like the obedient employee they wanted me to be. But I also kept receipts. Every email, every commit, every handoff. Everything that proved I had warned them, flagged risks, and done my part. Not to fight them with, at least not yet, but to protect myself when the walls came down. One afternoon, Lena cornered me near the elevators. Her face was pale, her voice clipped. "Galaxy's CTO sent another note," she said. "Module 6 won't deploy. They're calling it a blocker." I nodded slowly. That's what happens when you don't follow the environment requirements. She sighed, almost pleading. "Kate, can't you just step in and fix it?" I tilted my head. "Without the release form?" She looked away. She knew I was right. They'd built the rules to keep people like me in line. Now those same rules were tying their hands. By midweek, investors were circling. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. They wanted to know why Galaxy had paused. They wanted to know why the deal hadn't closed. And most of all, they wanted to know why Everett's son had been the face of the pitch instead of the engineer who built the system. That last question hit harder than any technical issue. The tension boiled over during a company-wide meeting. Everett appeared on screen, red-faced, voice strained. He barked about momentary setbacks and operational adjustments. But his eyes betrayed him. He wasn't just angry. He was scared. Chad sat beside him, stiff and pale, nodding at all the right moments but saying nothing. It was the first time I'd ever seen him quiet. When the call ended, the chat exploded with private messages. People wanted to know what was really happening. Some asked me directly. Others just hinted. I gave the same answer every time. Read the logs. Because the logs didn't lie. That night, I went home and sat in my driveway for a long time, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel. I wasn't tired, but I wasn't restless either. For years, I had carried this company on my back, fixing problems, patching disasters, building something out of nothing. And for years, I thought that was enough, that the work would speak for me. But the past weeks had shown me the truth. Work doesn't speak. People do. And when the people in charge care more about appearances than reality, competence is invisible until it's missing. Now, it was missing, and the cracks were showing everywhere. The following morning, Milo slid a folded piece of paper onto my desk. "You should see this," he whispered. It was a printout of an email chain between Everett and the board. The last message from one of the investors was short and brutal. "Has Rebecca been contacted? If not, why not?" I stared at the page for a long moment, then folded it neatly and placed it in my drawer. They could avoid me in meetings. They could strip my title from the slides. They could pretend I didn't exist. But outside their glass offices and polished boardrooms, the truth was starting to spread. And truth has a way of breaking through walls. By the time the investor pressure became impossible to ignore, the company had already shifted into survival mode. The office atmosphere changed overnight. HR suddenly acted warmer. Managers who hadn't spoken to me in weeks stopped by my desk with fake smiles and vague compliments. Even Lena, who once handed me documentation duty without blinking, now said things like, "We value your expertise, Kate." It was pathetic and transparent. Because I knew what had happened. Galaxy wasn't negotiating anymore. They weren't waiting. They had gone around the company entirely. And they had come to me. Marcus Liu called me directly. His voice was calm, measured. He didn't waste time. "Kate," he said, "I've reviewed the code myself. Every commit, every lock, every key. What you built isn't just functional. It's precise. Surgical, I didn't say anything at first. After years of being ignored, erased, belittled, those words almost felt foreign. He continued, "We don't need middlemen here. We want you. Independent contract. Your terms, your timeline, your signature." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "And Cortexia?" "They're out," Marcus said simply. "They broke what they didn't understand. We're not interested in apologies or optics. We're interested in results." It wasn't triumph I felt then. It was something steadier. Validation. After years of being treated like a disposable cog, someone finally saw the whole machine. And they knew whose hands had built it. Later that day, the company's attempts began. First came the flowers. An absurd bouquet showed up at my apartment door. Peonies, orchids, roses, all crammed into one arrangement that smelled like desperation. No card. Just silence wrapped in cellophane. Then came the emails. HR wrote about opening a new chapter together. Legal asked for my cooperation in resolving minor access issues. Everett himself sent a message, 3 paragraphs long, filled with words like partnership and respect. None of them mentioned the humiliation. None mentioned the demo. None mentioned the fact that they'd shoved me into the shadows while handing the wheel to a man who didn't even know where the engine was. The final attempt was the courier. I was making tea when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a man in a too large blazer, sweating through the fabric, holding a leather folder like it was radioactive. A white envelope sat neatly on top with a post-it note that read, "Urgent CEO signature enclosed." He knocked twice, waited, knocked again. I didn't move. Eventually, he sighed, snapped a photo of the envelope sitting on my porch, probably for legal proof, and walked back to his car. He lingered there as though expecting me to chase him down the driveway, beg for forgiveness, and sign whatever forms he carried. I let the kettle whistle and poured my tea. Earl Grey, my favorite. By the time I returned to the window, he was gone. That night, more emails filled my inbox. They promised new titles, higher pay, better offices. Some even hinted at stock options. but none of it mattered. They weren't offering those things because they valued me. They were offering them because they were drowning. And drowning people will cling to anything, even the person they once pushed underwater. I clicked Select All and deleted every message. The next morning, the sprinklers went off at dawn. When I stepped outside, the leather folder was drenched, papers inside warped and soggy. I walked past it without a second glance. Because I understood something now. Power isn't in titles or suits or corner offices. Power is in ownership of your work, your choices, your name. They had tried to take all of that from me, and now it was slipping through their fingers. When I checked my inbox later that day, a single new email sat at the top. Not from HR, not from Everett, not even from Lena. It was from Marcus. 5 words in the subject line. Do not open the door. The body was even shorter. They'll beg with flowers, apologies, and papers for you to sign. Do not open the door. The deal is off for them. See you Monday. I closed my laptop and let the silence settle around me. For the first time in years, I wasn't anxious. I wasn't exhausted. I was free. The collapse didn't happen with an explosion. It happened quietly, in pieces. I heard about it secondhand at first. Screenshots from Milo, a late-night text from someone in finance, whispers filtering through Slack channels. By the time the real news broke, the company wasn't trying to hide it anymore. They couldn't. Galaxy had cut ties. Not paused, not renegotiated. Canceled. An $80 million deal. Gone. Just like that. The board reacted like anyone would when money evaporates. They tore each other apart. I wasn't in the room, but the stories spread fast. Everett pounding his fists on the table, Chad babbling about strategic oversight, Lena crying in the hallway, investors demanding answers no one could give. At one point, Milo told me, someone asked point blank why my name was still on every build log, every commit, every authentication key. Why the entire system still depended on the person they had pushed aside. Chad apparently tried to spin it. Called me a legacy dependency. The silence that followed, Milo said, was so sharp it made his stomach twist. Meanwhile, my world was steady. I signed Marcus's contract without hesitation. The terms were better than anything I'd ever dreamed of. My scope, my timeline, my decisions. No more layers of people standing between me and my work. No more polishing slide decks for someone else's ego. When I hit send on the signed contract, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. The company tried one last time. Another courier came to my door. This one older, in a suit that actually fit. He carried a different folder, thinner, with a neat bow tied around it like a peace offering. He knocked 3 times. I didn't answer. Through the window, I saw him set the folder down, take a picture, and leave. Inside were forms, an NDA, reassignment of intellectual property, a retroactive consulting offer, padded with fake performance bonuses. It sat on my porch all afternoon. The sprinklers hit it again overnight. By morning, it was pulp. That felt right. I didn't gloat, didn't laugh, didn't send messages to old colleagues with, "I told you so." Instead, I cooked breakfast slowly, watered my plants, and took a walk without checking my phone every 5 minutes. I felt my shoulders drop for the first time in years. Because here's the truth. Revenge isn't about fireworks. It isn't about dramatic speeches or triumphant scenes. It's about balance. And balance had finally returned. Marcus called me again that week. "They'll try to smear you," he said matter-of-factly. "Spin the story, protect the family name. But I've seen the logs. I've seen the truth. And I don't work with liars." There was no flattery in his voice, just certainty. That was better than praise. "Then we're aligned," I said. From the outside, Cortexia kept pretending for a while, issuing vague press releases about internal restructuring and shifting priorities. But people in tech circles talk. The story spread. A nepotism hire botched the biggest deal in company history. and the engineer who built the system walked away untouched. Recruiters began reaching out to me within days. Old colleagues reappeared, some with apologies, others with proposals. I answered none of them, because I already had what I wanted. Not just the contract, not just the paycheck, though both were more than fair. What I had was freedom. On the Monday Marcus mentioned, I drove into the city, parked my car, and walked into Galaxy's offices. Not as an employee hidden behind someone else's shadow, but as myself. They greeted me by name. They shook my hand. They asked me where I wanted to start. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. That evening, back at home, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea. Across town, I knew Everett and Chad were still scrambling, sending more emails, calling more meetings, spinning more excuses. Their empire wasn't burning all at once, but the foundation had cracked. And once the cracks spread, collapse was inevitable. I didn't need to watch it happen. I didn't need to lift a finger. I just let the silence carry it all away. Work doesn't always speak for itself. But sometimes, when the right people finally listen, it speaks louder than any title, louder than any surname. That was the lesson I learned. And as I closed my laptop, with my new contract saved neatly under my name, I realized something simple. They had tried to bury me. But all they did was water the ground.